G'day everyone. Today we're having a look at another fundamental of Association Croquet, and that's pivot balls. One of the fundamentals in break building is playing flat mallet shots. Looking at last week, they were our most controlled shot of getting in front of the hoop. They're also our most controlled shot loading another hoop and getting a rush on a ball in the middle of the lawn. If you can do this and know where to put your pivot ball on the lawn, your whole break play will become a lot more controlled and more predictable. This can be done in trickier conditions, such as when you've got fast lawns or tough hoops and you don't need to rely on getting a rush out of the hoop. A good pivot ball will allow this to make your breaks easier. So what's a pivot ball? Well, you have a ball in the center of the lawn that when you go through a hoop, you can play maybe a drive or a little bit of a roll, putting a pioneer into one hoop ahead and having a nice rush on that ball in the center. Pivot balls take the pressure off creating a rush while coming through the hoop, meaning that you can play a nice controlled flat mallet shot after the hoop without worrying about where you land on the way through. One of the more straightforward positions on the lawn to play a pivot ball position is when you come through hoop one. If you've got a ball 3 or 4 yards to the west of the peg, you'll have a nice position to play a drive, putting a ball over towards hoop 3 and getting a rush on that pivot ball. Let's see one here. So pink isn't perfect there, but I've got a rush on my pivot ball. Pink's close enough to the hoop that I'm okay with it, and I'll be able to continue my break. An easy way of working out where your pivot ball needs to be on the lawn, because we all do have different strokes, is by just playing a drive, loading a ball to a hoop, and popping a flag in where you'd like your pivot ball on that line. So I've played my nice straightforward drive there, got a good load at hoop 3, and now I'm going to go and pop a flag in where I'd like my pivot ball. You can now go around the court and do this for all hoops, playing then from hoop 2, putting a ball at hoop 4 and popping a flag in. So again, after hoop 2, putting a ball to hoop 4, we can have a look at where our pivot ball might go. One of the things we've got to think about when positioning our pivot ball in the lawn is where do we want to rush it to? You've got a couple of options here. Some players will rush it directly into pivot ball position, and if that's where your rush is pointing, that's absolutely fine. Then taking it off, leaving the ball in pivot ball position, going to your next hoop. Where I like to rush my ball to is behind my load at my next hoop, so that if my load for the next hoop isn't in a good position, I can double load it or reload the hoop. This allows me a bit of control and flexibility with where I play my breaks, and I can always pop the ball back into pivot position, no troubles from the position I rush it to. So if I were to play this shot here, I'm going to be trying to get a rush on yellow to somewhere on the west boundary behind the green ball. It doesn't have to be pointing there, but somewhere near green. Then I can cut it either way back into pivot position or onto the boundary if I don't have a good load at 3. So I've managed to get a pretty good load at 3. Now I'm going to go and continue playing this break now by rushing white over towards the west boundary, then popping it back into that pivot position that we learnt where it was after hoop 2, putting a ball to hoop 4 with a little stand-up shot. You saw there that I was able to maintain control of hoop 2. I did play a little bit down on the ball, putting a pivot in for after hoop 2, but that's okay. And everything looks controlled, so we can make a break from that and continue on. Once you're quite adept at putting a pivot ball in and making a nice controlled break using it, you can advance quite easily onto more difficult breaks. So something like a triple peel or an interesting popping leave is now at your disposal because you've got control of a loose ball in the court. So getting rushes on those loose balls, using fundamentals of putting it in a position where you can play a flat mallet shot, putting a ball to the next hoop, getting a rush, those sorts of things. And I'll show you a scenario now where you can use that to your advantage in picking up a break. So if you say hit the duffer twice, where you're going to pop balls if you've got 2 on the boundary. In this example, I've hit the duffers twice, 4th turn on, popping it all the way towards hoop 4. Now some players here might go and load hoop 3 and try and get a rush to hoop 1 and then come back and try and get a rush down to the ball at hoop 3, get over to 2 somehow. It's a lot more simple than that. You've just got to trust yourself that you're going to get a rush using a nice flat mallet shot, a rush to hoop 2 that is, and play it like that. So we're actually going to be popping brown into a position where we can play a flat mallet shot from where those 2 balls lie, loading hoop 3 and getting a rush to hoop 2. So let's see that here. So I've managed to get the rush back onto the east boundary, slightly further south of where pink is. So now I have a couple more options. I can be popping a load into hoop 3, getting a rush on pink to brown, maybe pop pink in as my pivot ball, get a rush on brown to hoop 2. Now having left these balls on the boundary gives me control over my next few shots, playing flat mallet, stand-up shots, quite straightforward croquet. If I had popped brown to hoop 3, I'm not now guaranteed to get hoop 2 because I don't have balls in a nice tight position where they're safe and easy to play from. I hope this has shown you that you don't always need to have hoops loaded to make a break, and I'll go and continue this now. Okay, so I didn't quite have the room to get white all the way up to hoop 3 and get a rush on pink, but I've managed to keep my rush on pink, which is pretty vitally important. And I'm now going to pop that to hoop 3, getting a rush on brown to hoop 2. When you make one back with partner, this is another interesting position for our pivot ball. Normally, the natural play would be to tap onto that ball, pop it to 3 back and get a rush on the pivot ball. In this situation, however, you don't want to be making 3 back off partner because you're trying to make a lead with your first ball round. So I'm now going to rush green towards my pivot ball, pop it into the centre as my new pivot ball, rush white behind pink, pop pink to 3 back and play to hoop 2 back. So there we saw quite a standard position to swap a pivot ball, which you can always do if you don't want to be playing a hoop off partner or your opposition ball, if it's a tricky hoop. So that's just another scenario where we can use a pivot ball to still play safely, stand up shots, but maintain control of our break. Now again folks, thanks for watching. I hope this has taught you a little bit about pivot balls. They're well worth implementing in your break play. Don't go loading hoops, 2 or 3 hoops ahead. Just play a pivot ball, make your breaks nicely, and once you get around to more complicated breaks, it'll all fall into itself just nicely. Enjoy.